You were taught that compassion is the highest virtue, that to feel another's pain is to be truly human. You were told that to withhold pity is to be cruel, that to turn away from suffering is a moral failure. But what if this very impulse, this reflexive rush to soothe, to coddle, to rescue, is the silent killer of greatness? What if the hand you extend in mercy is the same one that strangles potential, that keeps the fallen from rising, that ensures they never learn the strength to stand alone? Nietzsche saw it with terrifying clarity. Pity is not love. It is not nobility. It is the velvet-gloved fist of the weak, masquerading as virtue while it enfeebles the strong. It is the shadow that creeps over the human spirit, whispering, "You are fragile. You need saving. You cannot bear the weight of your own life." And the tragedy? You believe it. You have been conditioned to mistake pity for kindness, to confuse dependence for connection, to think that by carrying others, you are lifting them up, when in truth, you are teaching them to despise their own legs. Think of the last time you rushed to spare someone from their pain, the friend heartbroken by a betrayal, and you, with your well-meaning platitudes. "He never deserved you. You're better off." Did you pause to consider that grief, like fire, forges something harder in its wake, or the colleague drowning in failure? And you, with your ready excuses, "The system is rigged. It wasn't your fault." Did you ever wonder if shame, that brutal but honest teacher, might have been the only thing sharp enough to cut through their excuses? Pity is the enemy of metamorphosis. It interrupts the sacred process of struggle, the alchemy that turns suffering into strength. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly because it was spared the dark, suffocating clutch of the chrysalis. The oak does not grow tall because the wind was forbidden to shake its branches. And yet, we insist on shielding each other from every storm, on softening every blow. And then we wonder why so many break at the first touch of real pressure. This is Nietzsche's warning. A culture steeped in pity is a culture that breeds mediocrity. It is a society that prizes comfort over conquest, that elevates safety above sovereignty. The great ones, the artists, the thinkers, the warriors of the spirit, are not forged in the warm, stagnant waters of sympathy. They are hammered into being on the anvil of adversity, hardened by the refusal of anyone to save them from themselves. But here is the deeper, more unsettling truth. Pity is not just something we give. It is something we demand. We have learned to weaponize our suffering, to hold it up like a badge that entitles us to the labor of others. "Look how I bleed. Now you must stop your life to tend to me." And in this exchange, both parties are diminished. The one who refuses to bear their own weight, and the one who stoops to carry it for them. This is the prison of pity, a cell with no bars, because its inmates do not even realize they are locked inside. They call it kindness. They call it love. But Nietzsche would call it what it is: the slow, sweet poison that drains the world of its heroes. Pity is not a simple emotion. It is a transaction, a silent exchange of power disguised as tenderness. To understand how it erodes greatness, we must dissect its anatomy, trace the veins of its deception back to the heart of human weakness. Nietzsche's indictment of pity is not a callous rejection of suffering. It is a refusal to sanctify it. He does not deny pain. He denies the lie that pain is an unqualified evil, that rescue is always righteous, that the strong owe their strength to the weak. At its core, pity is a denial of responsibility, for both the pitier and the pitied. When we pity, we assume the role of the savior, but in doing so, we strip the other of their agency. We tell them, without words, "Your suffering is too vast for you to handle. You are not capable of enduring it, so I must endure it for you." This is the first betrayal, the theft of struggle. Struggle is not merely an obstacle. It is the whetstone against which the self is sharpened. Remove it, and you leave the blade dull. The musician spared criticism never masters his craft. The athlete shielded from defeat never learns the taste of true victory. The thinker protected from contradiction never sharpens his ideas into weapons. Pity, in its haste to alleviate, robs its object of the very friction necessary for growth. But the second betrayal is subtler, more insidious. Pity corrodes the pitier. To habitually extend pity is to feed the delusion that you are above suffering, that you are the exception to the universal law of struggle. It inflates the ego even as it masquerades as humility. I am strong enough to carry you, it whispers, but you are not strong enough to carry yourself. This is the arrogance of pity, the unspoken belief that you are the exception to the fragility you see in others. And in this arrogance, you stunt your own growth, for the act of constant bearing leaves no room for your own becoming. Nietzsche's alternative is not cruelty, but something far more demanding. Amor fati, the love of fate, not the resignation to suffering, but the embrace of it as the necessary ground of strength. The great individual does not flee from hardship. He seeks it out, not as a masochist, but as a sculptor seeks the resistance of stone. Without it, there is no form, no shape, no masterpiece. This is why Nietzsche reserves his harshest scorn for the morality of pity. It is a morality of stagnation, a doctrine that mistakes comfort for virtue and suffering for sin. Yet here we collide with the modern world's central dogma, that all suffering is an error to be corrected, a glitch in the system of happiness. We medicate sadness before understanding its message. We pathologize anger before interrogating its cause. We conflate trauma with tragedy, forgetting that trauma is not merely a wound. It is also a reckoning, the refusal to let pain do its work, to let it carve its lessons into the soul, is the refusal of transformation itself. And what of the pitted? They are not innocent in this dynamic. There is a seduction in victimhood, a perverse power in surrendering to helplessness. To be pitted is to be absolved of effort, to trade agency for the narcotic of sympathy. Look at what was done to me, the cry goes, and see how I am owed. This is the shadow side of pity, the way it fosters a culture of moral debt, where suffering becomes currency and resentment the lingua franca of the weak. Nietzsche saw this with prophetic clarity. A society that rewards victimhood will soon find itself with an abundance of victims. But the most dangerous illusion of all is the belief that pity is love. Love demands, pity excuses. Love sees potential and insists upon it. Pity sees brokenness and accommodates it. The parent who pities their child's failures raises a dependent. The parent who loves enough to let them fail raises a sovereign. The leader who pities their followers' limitations breeds mediocrity. The leader who loves them enough to demand excellence breeds giants. This is the paradox at the heart of Nietzsche's warning. True compassion is often ruthless. It does not rush to bind every wound, because it knows some wounds must bleed before they heal. It does not shield from every storm, because it understands that roots grow deeper when forced to grip the earth against the wind. The greatest act of love may be the refusal to pity, to look into the eyes of the struggling and say, "You are stronger than you think. Now prove it." There is an old tale, whispered in the fragments of lost philosophies, about a village nestled between a mountain and a chasm. The villagers lived in perpetual fear of the chasm's edge. So much so that, over generations, they built a wall around it, high and impenetrable, to keep their children from falling. No one could approach the edge. No one could peer into its depths. The wall became sacred, a monument to their collective caution. But as the years passed, the villagers noticed something unsettling. Their children were weak, not in body, but in spirit. They hesitated at the smallest risks, trembled at the unknown, and when storms came, they cowered instead of adapting. The wall had done its job too well. It had not only kept them from falling, it had kept them from learning how to climb. This is the parable of pity. The chasm is suffering, and the wall is the instinct to shield, to intervene, to say no to every potential fall. But the fall is not the enemy. The refusal to rise afterward is. The villagers thought they were preserving life, but what they were really preserving was fear. Nietzsche's philosophy echoes this. The attempt to eliminate suffering does not create happiness. It creates fragility. And fragility, in the long run, is far more dangerous than pain. Consider another myth, not from antiquity, but from nature. The eagle, when teaching its young to fly, does not carry them endlessly on its back. There comes a moment when it must tilt its wings and let them drop. The eaglet falls, tumbles, panics, and in that panic, its wings remember their purpose. The parent does not intervene too soon. It watches, circling, allowing the struggle, because it knows. Without the fall, there is no flight. Human pity, by contrast, would demand the eagle never let go. How cruel, we would say. How unnatural. But the true cruelty would be to deny the eaglet the sky forever. These stories reveal the deeper truth Nietzsche warned of. Pity disrupts the natural order of growth. In mythology, the hero is never made heroic by being spared his trials. Heracles does not become mighty by avoiding his labors. He is forged through them. Odysseus does not return home by circumventing the storms. He survives them. Even in religious narratives, the prophet is not refined in comfort. He is tested in the desert, broken before he is remade. Pity, in its modern incarnation, seeks to erase these trials, to shortcut the process, not realizing that the process is the transformation. But there is a darker layer here. Pity does not just prevent greatness, it actively cultivates its opposite. The ancient Greeks had a concept: hubris, the arrogance that invites destruction. Modernity has its own hubris, subtler but no less deadly. The arrogance of assuming we can, and should, eliminate all suffering. This is the hubris of the surgeon who, in his zeal to remove the tumor, kills the patient. Suffering is not always the tumor. Sometimes, it is the immune response. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, often a foil to Nietzsche, saw suffering as the inevitable condition of life. But where Schopenhauer resigned himself to it, Nietzsche demanded something more radical. Not to escape suffering, but to make it meaningful. Pity denies even this possibility. It treats suffering as a glitch, not a teacher. And so we arrive at the most dangerous myth of all, the myth of safety. We tell ourselves that if we can just cushion the world enough, just soften every edge, we will finally be free of pain. But the truth is far more unsettling. A life without resistance is not a life without suffering. It is a life without strength. The muscle atrophies without tension. The mind grows sluggish without challenge. The spirit withers without something to push against. Pity, in its quest to remove all thorns, fails to realize that roses grow strongest where the winds are harshest. We live in an age where pity has been institutionalized, not just in our personal relationships, but in our schools, our workplaces, even our governments. The modern world runs on a currency of victimhood, where suffering is leveraged for attention, for advantage, for absolution from responsibility. To implement Nietzsche's warning is to wage war against this entire system, not with cruelty, but with something far more subversive: the refusal to participate in the lie. This begins with recognizing pity in its many disguises. The overprotective parent who cannot let their child fail, the manager who lowers standards to spare feelings, the culture that pathologizes every hardship as trauma, and then, consciously, relentlessly, choosing a different path. Consider education, where the rot of pity has taken deep root. A generation of students has been raised under the doctrine that struggle is a sign of systemic failure rather than a necessary step in mastery. Math problems are simplified for those who can't. Reading lists are shortened for those who struggle. And failure is meticulously scrubbed from the record lest it damage self-esteem. The result? Not resilience, but a brittle arrogance. Students who believe they deserve success without the capacity to earn it. The antidote is not to withhold help, but to redefine what help means. True mentorship does not remove obstacles. It teaches the student to surmount them. It says, "This will hurt, and you will be better for it." It understands that confidence cannot be gifted. It must be forged in the private crucible of effort and recovery. The workplace, too, has become a temple to pity's empty virtues. Deadlines are extended indefinitely for the overwhelmed. Mediocrity is rewarded under the banner of fairness, and critical feedback is diluted into meaninglessness to spare feelings. But high-performance cultures, those that produce real innovation, real excellence, operate differently. They reject pity not because they lack compassion, but because they respect their people too much to lie to them. The military does not lower fitness standards to accommodate the out of shape. The operating room does not tolerate half-competent surgeons for the sake of inclusion. These fields thrive precisely because they refuse to conflate pity with morality. They understand that the highest form of respect is the belief in another's capacity to rise. Even our personal relationships are corrupted by pity's subtle poison. How many friendships have devolved into mutual enablement, where both parties conspire to avoid hard truths under the guise of support? How many romantic relationships stagnate because one partner endlessly rescues the other from self-inflicted crises? The alternative, Nietzsche's alternative, is a love that demands. A love that says, I will walk with you through hell, but I will not carry you. A love that understands the most painful gift is often the most necessary. The refusal to collude in someone's self-destruction. The societal implications are even more dire. A democracy built on pity, on the endless redistribution of resources to those who claim the most victimhood, is a democracy in decline. Rome fell not when its borders were breached, but when its citizens traded the rigors of self-reliance for the comforts of bread and circuses. The welfare state, untempered by expectation or accountability, does not lift people up. It entrenches them in dependency. This is not an argument against compassion, but against the delusion that compassion means eliminating struggle. The strongest societies, like the strongest individuals, are those that view hardship as a challenge to be met, not a wrong to be remedied. Nietzsche's warning was never about hardening our hearts. It was about the courage to see pity for what it truly is. Not love, but fear in disguise. Fear of others' pain, fear of our own discomfort in witnessing it, and ultimately, fear of the unvarnished truth that growth requires friction. To transcend pity is not to abandon compassion, but to redefine it as something far more demanding. The willingness to let others face the consequences of their choices. The resolve to celebrate strength rather than reward weakness. The vision to see suffering as a sculptor rather than an executioner. The call, then, is not to cruelty, but to a higher love, a love that trusts in the human capacity to overcome. It begins with small revolts, letting the struggling friend find their own solution, holding the employee to the standard they resent but secretly crave, resisting the urge to intervene in every minor hardship. It grows into a philosophy of life, one that measures compassion not by how much suffering we alleviate, but by how much strength we cultivate. The path forward is clear, though it cuts against the grain of our times. We must build a culture that venerates resilience over victimhood, that prizes the earned over the given, that understands the difference between helping and enabling. This is not merely a personal choice. It is a civilizational one. For the alternative, a world drowned in pity, is a world without greatness, without heroes, without the towering individuals who remind us what humans are capable of becoming.